And all right, it's finally over. After battling that thing for approximately 30 seconds, time for the moment of truth. Boom, son. Boom, just like that. Hey guys, this is Vespa Man Zero. I know I've been gone for quite a long time, and I decided to finally get back into this YouTube biz. So first off, in order for me to get towards my goal of getting back to my channel, getting back to gaming, I decided that my old rig was not really up to snuff and that I would need to make an upgrade. Certain things that I was looking for, like 16 core high core count processors, just wasn't compatible with my prior machine. I was rocking an old Skylake 6700K, had 16 gigabytes of RAM and a Fury X, which came with the liquid cooler, which could have died at any point with only 4 gigabytes of RAM. So starting off with my first part of choice, I went ahead and went with the Ryzen 9 7950X. This is basically the granddaddy of processors right now, outside of the units with the 3D V cache, but I have 16 cores as well as 32 threads. This part here is not just great for gaming, but amazing for doing things like video editing on programs like Adobe Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve, which are programs that I'm going to be looking forward to using coming up soon here. Moving on from there, I've made a controversial choice. I'm going to try to go with an IS55. Now this is a low profile CPU cooler with 125 watt TDP that it's supposed to be able to handle. Now that is a discrepancy from the wattage on the 7950X, but I plan to use eco mode and see how that goes. And if I think that this product holds up, I'm going to do a separate review just for this cooler using the 105 watt eco mode on the 7950X. Going from there, the second most important thing was getting, for me, an Nvidia 40 series graphics card. So I went with the 4070 Ti due to this $800 price point at MSRP, and I was able to get this one for $809. The reason why I went for this card is because I also plan on getting into a little bit of game development. I formerly used to play with Unreal Engine 4. I'm really interested in getting into Unreal Engine 5, and I did not want to limit myself when I know that there are driver tools such as DLSS, frame generation, as well as the ray tracing capabilities of an Nvidia graphics card. So I wanted to make sure that I'd be able to utilize any and all of that, while also having a realistic level of power coming from my graphics card as far as its ability to rasterize, so that when I'm developing my games and I'm targeting the frame rates, I'm targeting visuals, that I have a reasonable price point graphics card to go with in order to have a good standardized settings for whatever I decide to go for when I make my game. So as far as what I'm slotting these two things into, I went ahead and went with the Asus ROG Strix X670EI gaming Wi-Fi. So this is a mini ITX gaming motherboard from Asus. The reason why I went for this motherboard specifically was the mini ITX form factor, because I'm definitely going to be downsizing this time around. It does have 64 gigs of RAM, which I think is more than good enough for any type of editing from anywhere from 1080p to 4K, as well as the fact that this actually has not Thunderbolt 4, but USB 4. And reading all the specs on USB 4, it is virtually identical to Thunderbolt 4. I wanted to make sure that if I'm transferring any large files, such as video files, from my computer to a portable device or to another device, that would go through smoothly and quickly and would give a little bit of longevity. This motherboard also has a great power delivery system, which I think is going to do a good job delivering power to my 7950X CPU. Going on from there, I decided on the SK Hynix Platinum P41 SSD. So this is a solid state drive. It's M.2 format NVMe. It is one of the fastest drives you can really get on the market. It is PCI Express 4.0. It also has a 2 terabyte capacity. There's not a lot more to say about this drive. It got a lot of good reviews, so it impressed me. I decided recently to go with it over the 980 Pro due to the recent news pertaining to that drive having some failure issues, which landed me on this drive as my second choice, even though it was $10 higher in price. So going on from there, I went with the Be Quiet Lightwings 120 millimeter high-speed fans. For fans that have ARGB capabilities, these ones seem to do the best out of all the reviews that I saw as far as performance, while also having good ARGB that was visible from multiple directions. And that basically is the only reason that I went with this fan. I've gone with Be Quiet fans before for radiators on prior liquid cooled builds. I like them, I've used them in the past, and I know that they're dependable, good fans. So a little bit of brand consciousness also played a role there. And then moving on to my choice of RAM, I went with 64 gigabytes of G.Skill Ripjaws S5 RAM. This RAM here is 5600 megahertz speed. The reason why I went for 5600 over 6000 is that the 6000, while it is better for gaming, the price discrepancy didn't really add up. And the 5600 I felt was a good compromise. I didn't want to go down to 5200. I knew that 5600 should be pretty stable. And I know that this RAM has a very low latency, which I know is also important and sometimes just as important as the overall RAM speed. And I went for this pretty power supply here. This is the Silverstone Extreme 850R Platinum. So it is a platinum rated power supply. It has 850 watts of power, PCI 5.0, which is basically the equivalent of ATX, of the new ATX format. So it does have the 24 pin connector that you need for the newer Nvidia GPU. So I don't have to use the new adapter that comes with these GPUs. I'll be able to plug it right away into the Silverstone power supply. I went for an SFX unit because the case I will be putting all of this in, and that also explains my CPU cooler choice, my CPU cooler choice is the Lian Li A4 H20. So this case is inspired by the Dan SFX cases, or excuse me, Dan SF cases, something like that. It is a very small ITX case, and my goal here is to be able to make a portable build that I can bring with me places, that I can bring out here to the studio, bring it back home. Maybe if I need to work on something with one of my friends, because we're planning on getting some stuff together, some projects together, I'll be able to bring it to his place or another location. And I thought that this case would be perfect for that. And that basically sums up the different parts that I've chosen. Now I do have a few other small parts, but those will be explained later in the video. That's mostly gonna come down to thermal paste, ARGB splitters, that kind of thing. So unboxing the first piece, I am pretty excited about this CPU. I've actually been a fan of AMD CPUs for some time, even when they weren't cool, when they had the bulldozer architecture. I had an FX 6300, I had an FX, I think it was 8700, and I had an 8700E. Terrible CPUs, but they're what I could afford at the time. So I definitely didn't imagine there'd be a time where AMD was on top as far as the CPU game goes. When the Ryzen first came out in 2016, I really wanted a Ryzen CPU, but at that time I had just spent a bunch of money on a fancy new 6700K at that time. So I waited and I waited and I waited. The whole market kind of crashed because of cryptocurrency, and it kind of became not worth it for me to get a new computer. So I ended up deciding against it, but all the computers I had built up to that point for my friends and family all included Ryzen CPUs. There goes that signature orange Ryzen circle there. And now we can get to the actual CPU here. See here, so it's supposed to open it there. And of course it's inside the plastic. Look at how pretty that thing is. Has a very different IHS from the prior Ryzen CPUs, as well as basically any prior CPU. They went with a really fancy design. It almost looks like a Lego piece when you really look at it, or some sort of like, I don't know what kind, looks like some weird Roblox, Minecraft looking thing. Pretty interesting design, beautiful CPU. And it's just really crazy that they're able to fit 16 cores inside of something like this. When Ryzen first came out, it was basically double the size if you wanted a 16 core CPU, and you'd have to go with Threadripper. So to have this now I got this for a little under $600 is pretty incredible when you consider I spent $450 for a 4-core CPU just 5 years ago. So we have some instructions here, certificate of authenticity, some really nice foam inside the box, and then the rest of the box. So only all this to carry something like this, but it's good. You got to keep stuff like this safe. It's got to come in like extra packaging, and at least for marketing's sake, to have a little bit of extra, fold out, make it a little bit of a process, have a little extra art. And it looks like that actually snaps back in place. Is that magnetic? There's even a magnetic piece on the end of the box. So they made sure that if you're gonna buy one of their newer Zen 4 CPUs, that it's gonna be a great unboxing experience. All right, so we have the IS55. This is a low profile CPU cooler from ID Cooling. It is the IS55, called the IS55 because it is a 55 centimeter cooler. According to the specs on the Lian Li A4 H20. That is the highest CPU cooler height that it can take. So hopefully this is gonna fit in here. This does have ARGB, so we'll be able to get all types of coloring patterns. We'll be able to get all types of effects, so that'll be pretty cool to see. I have actually opened this before. I previously tried to use it on my old Skylake build and ultimately decided that I actually wanted to do a new computer altogether, but it didn't really get any use. So I put everything back in there when I decided to get my new computer. It's pretty straightforward. You get a little box at the top with your installation guide. You get your LGA 1700 brackets as well as your AM5 brackets, a little bit of thermal paste to come with it. We won't be using this, and a very useful Phillips head screwdriver. So now to get to the cool part, the actual CPU cooler itself comes with an ARGB fan, as well as a PWM fan header and an ARGB header as well. The CPU cooler does come with 5 heat pipes to help with the transfer of heat, and a nice 120mm fan. For a low profile fan of this height, this thing's actually pretty chunky. It was a lot bigger than I was expecting when I actually unboxed it the first time. And looking at it now, it's pretty impressive. I was coming from previously when I tried to do low profile, I had a CryoRig C7, and this thing looks like it could eat about 3 of those, which is great because the cooler height is actually still very low. So I have the G.Skill S5 RAM, 64 gigabytes, 5600 megahertz. One of the primary reasons I actually went with this RAM is due to the low profile size. It is only 33mm in height, so the heat sinks are almost right at the height of the actual RAM sticks themselves. And one of the reasons I needed that was because the motherboard that I chose has a very, very high very high heat sink over the IO. So the way that I'm gonna have to orient this CPU cooler, the RAM sticks are gonna need to be able to fit under it. And that's why I went with this. So let's go ahead and open this up. Oh, super easy, way easier to open than I was expecting with this plastic clear packaging. That stuff is the devil. Pretty straightforward. They feel really nice. I like that they have like ventilated holes inside of them. That makes it look really cool. G.Skill sticker. I don't know if that's gonna make it onto my computer, but I will think about it. So pretty straightforward, 2 sticks of RAM. Very, very pretty. I will say that, I do like the design. This is not my first time having G.Skill RAM. I actually had G.Skill RAM before. I don't remember the kit name, but it was a little bit higher, had some bigger heat sinks, pretty common to see those around. But I really wanted to go with something low profile with the S5 this time. So getting to, I think, one of my more interesting pieces that I went with is the ROG Strix X670E gaming Wi-Fi, mouthful of a name motherboard. This thing I'm very excited about. I've never actually went with the full ITX build before, so this is gonna be pretty interesting putting this together. This is about as much motherboard as you can buy for ITX, meaning the IO that you have here with the amount of USB options that you have is incredible. The amount of options that you have for your storage is incredible on this motherboard, as well as some other pieces that it comes with that I'm very interested in. It does come with some sort of like external DAC for audio, so I'm also interested to see how living with that's gonna be as well. So I'm just gonna punch through this. I am a little bit of an Asus fanboy. One of the reasons why I like Asus so much is that they never skimp on build quality. I understand that they're not always the best price to performance, but if you do some research, you'll see that a lot of Asus products are very much overbuilt and they're extremely durable. They don't skip on their VRMs, they don't skimp on their MOSFETs. So they really go all out as a company on any product that they make, or almost any product that they make. There's always gonna be some inconsistency within a brand, but I definitely stick to the higher end stuff when it comes to Asus. So see here, it's coming inside of a static proof bag. That's pretty standard. Let's go ahead and just remove this and get a good look at it. Try to be careful about where I'm touching it. There we go. We can get this thing through here. See, it looks like it actually punched through part of the bag here during shipping. That's why I was getting caught. There we go. There we go. Now it should be coming along. Boom. Very petite, very small. This here is basically the home base for all the parts that you install on your computer. Seeing that they're able to get something like this small is incredible. It only has 2 DIMM slots for the RAM. So the maximum amount of RAM you'll be able to put on here is 64 gigabytes. But I think for quite some time, that's going to be more than enough. I definitely think it'll be more than enough for someone like me who kind of produces part-time. Most of the time I'm going to be gaming on here, and I thought that 64 gigabytes of RAM was a really good compromise to have. The VRMs are actually actively cooled, so as you can see, there's a very large heatsink here connected to the power delivery system, and there is actually a small fan in there, and it will ventilate out of the back side. There's a bit of a back plate on the back here, as well as your regular old like AM5 back support plate that I think most of us who are familiar with AM5 at this point already know that is there. And a few options here for your fans, as well as your ARGB headers. And we'll get more into that as I start to install stuff. I think the star of the show on this motherboard though is the beautiful, beautiful 40 gigabytes per second, or 40 gigabits per second, one of those, but it's very fast, USB 4. And that is probably the #1 reason why I went with this motherboard. I could have went with some other motherboards of micro ATX in size that would have had a little bit more RAM, but for the price and for the performance overall that I'm expecting to get from this motherboard, I'm very excited to have these. I think that it all makes sense to me. And I plan on keeping this motherboard for a very long time. So don't be surprised if I'm using this motherboard with the next generation of AMD CPUs or the generation after that. The AM5 platform is guaranteed to be here for at least 3 years. Since this came out last year, we can expect at least another 2 years. During the prior generations of Ryzen, we actually got 5 years out of the AM4 platform. So this motherboard may be with me for a bit. So basically this motherboard, unlike many other motherboards, it does not have onboard sound. So there isn't going to be anywhere for you to plug in, let's say like a optical out or your regular like red, blue, green, and all that stuff on the back of this motherboard. Instead, there's a dedicated USB slot that will actually connect with this DAC here, and then you will connect this to your speakers or your monitor or wherever you want to connect this to. There's a lot of cool features on this product, so you can actually update your BIOS from here. It has a BIOS switch. It has a switch for PBO, which is your Precision Boost Overdrive for Ryzen CPU, so you can activate that. It also has a flex key, which you can assign to different functions. You have your audio controls here at the top, as well as another USB-C 10 gigabytes per second, and another USB-C as well here. And you have your in and out for your microphone and your headphones. So for my graphics card of choice, I went with the Geforce RTX 4070 Ti. I understand that this card is a bit controversial due to its pricing, due to its performance and the amount of RAM that it has, as well as the memory bus. But the reason why I chose this card was because it was the most affordable option that I had, while still being able to go with a Geforce card. So the reason why I went with Geforce cards this time is because of their capabilities that they have. There we go, on the bottom side. As far as ray tracing, that being superior to the Radeon options, as well as its ability to perform inside a blender, where in many cases it can outperform Radeon cards that are far more powerful than it, and its equivalent, let's say the 7900 XT, falls far behind in most tests in Blender, which is something that I'm looking to do. So this thing is a monster of a graphics card. We got a couple support brackets. I don't know if I'll be getting much use out of these in this build, but we will see. As well as the adapter that I briefly mentioned earlier. And this is because they're going with the new connector on these GPUs that isn't used by prior power supplies. I'm not really going to be using this because my power supply is new and up to date and fancy, and it already has the connector with it. Ooh, look at this thing. I'll tell you what, this Gigabyte Eagle card, this is the Gigabyte Eagle variant of this card. It is very pretty. It is very pretty. It feels sturdily built, but I don't think that's hard to have that feeling when it's made out of metal. This card is very long. It's still not one of the longer options. I don't remember exactly the length of this card. It's small. It's good enough to go inside of an ITX build. One thing that I noticed as somebody who's been building since 2014 is that graphics cards have gotten humongous. I mean, the size of this card just looks goofy to me. It looks absolutely ridiculous. And this is the fact that this card is, I think it's 3 slots or 2.5 slots. Actually, I think it's a 3 slot, or maybe even at 3.5. That is preposterous to me. that cards can even be that big at this point, but that is the way things have gone. If you look very closely on the card, you can see that the PCB actually stops here. So the rest of the length of the card is actually just cooling. One advantage of that, of course, is that you're running at really, really low temperatures. That is better for your power delivery system. That is better for your GPU. I just don't know if that is adding the value that I think a lot of graphic card manufacturers are actually trying to make it appear that it adds. I think that at this point, if you produce, let's say, a 2-fan GPU that cuts off here, it doesn't look as premium. I think that's what it comes down to. It doesn't look as premium, it doesn't look as good. You can't say on your marketing when it gets benchmarked by all the large channels that your GPU runs as cool, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really change the TDP of the card. It may slightly affect the efficiency of the card, but overall, running a graphics card at 75 or 80 degrees is not going to kill your graphics card before the warranty's over. But this is what we're stuck with. I could not find anything much smaller than this. So other than that though, I mean, that's more on the negative side. It is a really beautiful card. It's got 3 very beautiful fans. I do like the front design that's on the card. It's got some nice like Gigabyte, looks like some sort of stickers. Actually, this might light up. So we'll see more about that once we get this thing installed. It's got like a nice like grill in the back. You can see the pass through, which is really cool on the back side of the card. So overall, beautiful card. I'm definitely a fan of the appearance. I just don't know if this kind of cooling is necessary for a card like a 4070 Ti. 70 series cards in the past have not required this, but I understand that a lot of this comes down to marketing, and apparently they were expecting these cards to be a little bit more power hungry than they ended up being. Okay, so the power supply that I went with is a Silverstone 850 Extreme 850R Platinum. As explained before, it is a platinum rated power supply, which means that it has a very good power efficiency. It's 850 watts. I believe this is really all that I would need for this PC. I went through PC part picker. I picked the most extreme parts that I could, and I don't think anything came up to 850 watts. So in 2023, 850 watts is about all you need. Now, in some circumstances, this might cut it close. If you have like a 4090, this might cut it close. If you want to overclock, this may not be enough, but for what I have with the 4070 Ti and the 7950X that I plan to run in eco mode, I think that this power supply is more than good enough for the job. The primary reason why I went for it was the connector that does go with the newer Nvidia GPUs, so I don't have to use the adapter, as well as the fact that it is SFX, so it's going to fit into the very small case that I purchased. Let's go ahead and get this thing open. I've never actually had a Silverstone power supply before, so this will be pretty interesting. I'll be definitely forming an opinion about the brand. This is an extra support bracket to install the PSU. Let's see what we got here. We got a bunch of cables, bunch of cables. It's pretty standard, but let's actually look at the power supply. Now, unlike the graphics card, this is by far the smallest power supply I have ever seen in my life. I've never seen a power supply this small. I've never owned an SFX power supply, but to give you an idea of what I am used to, I came off of the AX1500i from Corsair, and that is probably one of the largest power supplies to have ever been made. This power supply is about, it's about a third of that one. So this is pretty incredible that they can put 850 watts inside of something this size. And it's quite pretty. I mean, it's quite pretty. Not much to it. It's matte black. It's got the little snowflake on the top. You know, it's got your basic stickers and whatnot. But overall, I'm just kind of impressed by the size of the product. Here is the SK Hynix P41 SSD. It is a PCI Express NVMe 4.0 M.2 SSD. I know that's a mouthful, and there's 2 terabytes in capacity. So let's get this thing open. This is one of the fastest NVMe SSDs on the market right now. And it's pretty incredible. I've seen it in a lot of benchmarks. It has a decent endurance. I think it more or less matches what you'll find from Samsung 980 Pro. The only reason I didn't go for that 980 Pro, as I stated earlier, is they've been having some failures. And while I could buy it and update it, I just didn't feel like dealing with it. So I just wanted to go ahead and get myself something that was not defective out of the box, or potentially defective out of the box, as far as I know. So it comes in this weird little white thing holding it in. All right, I'm gonna very delicately remove this because I'm not ready to install it. And just so you can get a good look at it, that thing is beautiful. This is my first time with the M.2 SSD. So this thing, I mean, it's pretty cool. 2 terabytes on something tiny and small like this. Not much to say. There's a very, very small little piece of tape over here, and that basically has the label, and that is it. So I'm gonna place this back in very gently and pop that back down. So now to my choice of fan. Went with the Be Quiet Lightwings High Speed. So these actually get up to 2,500 RPM. These are Be Quiet, I believe it's the first ARGB fan, or technically their second. I guess you have the regular Lightwings, and then you have these that are high speed. It's a pretty good looking fan. I mean, it's regular Be Quiet affair. It's black. It's not a whole lot of razzle dazzle until you get this thing plugged into an ARGB header, and that's where the magic starts. So as you can see, there's a lighting ring that goes around the perimeter of the fan, and it's actually viewable from the side as well. So if you have it side installed and you have like a glass or acrylic panel, you'll actually be able to see the lighting effects on the fan from the side view. And if you look on the back very closely, you can actually see that there's a lighting ring that shows through on that side as well. You have your ARGB header, you have your PWM fan header, and then you actually can daisy chain this to another fan and connect them together so that you can be plugged into a single ARGB header and get ARGB signal to both fans. And that's that. The reason why I went with these is because I did want some nice lighting effects. In my case, even though it's not like a see-through, it's not acrylic, it's not glass, but of course you will be able to see the light through the case. I just wanted to have some good effects, but also still have good performance and be able to have that control over the effects that you get with ARGB fans. I was holding that for like 30 seconds, bro. All right, and here we have the A4 H20 case. Now, this case does support water cooling. I decided not to go with water cooling just because of you have a few complications with that. You can deal with pump failures. There's just more pieces there. There's more chance for leakage. I understand that they do make a lot of good products now, but I do need this to be my last computer for a while. So I decided that I'm not going to go with air cooling. I want it to be as small as possible, to have it be as portable as possible, and not basically be a monstrosity on my desk, which led me down to this computer here. It is air coolable up to 55 millimeters of clearance, which is why I went with the ID Cooling IS55. Let's get this thing open and see what we got. All right. Whew. Cold to the touch. Let me flip it upside right. Oh, it looks nice. And it is crazy to think that I'm gonna be able to fit this much power inside of a case this tiny. Just for comparison, I'm gonna somehow fit this in here. That's what PC Part Picker told me I could do it. I see there's a little bit of clearance. It should go right about there, but man, that is barely making it in there. It is damn near as thick as the case. It is damn near as thick as the case. So this case is a beautiful, tiny masterpiece. It is a spiritual successor to the Dan SFX with some water cooling capabilities. Unfortunately, I will not be using those, but it does have that option. So as you can see on the front panel here, we do have 10 gigabytes per second USB-C. We have your microphone and headphone jack, as well as a USB-A port and your on and off button. And on the back side here, as you can see, you have 3 slots that you can use. So you can fit up to a 3-slot GPU here. And that's about it. It's not too many frills on the outside. But the cool thing I think about this case is that it is a sandwich case, meaning that, let's see how easy this is to take off. All right, I figured it out. So you just pop it off the side and basically has these little rivets, if you want to call it that stick into the side there, and a couple screws to secure it from there. Should be toolless, but it is actually pretty tough without a screwdriver. Boom, there we go. That one went pretty easy. All right. So the way that this case works, it's actually what's called a sandwich case. So I'll actually be able to fit my graphics card on one side my motherboard on the other side. That way they're both getting their own source of airflow. So we're not adding heat to the case, that you're not adding GPU heat that is gonna heat the CPU cooler up, or if you put a water cooler up. There's also space to ventilate out of the top here. And it has a PCI Express 4.0 ribbon cable in here to attach the graphics card to the motherboard through the case, since it won't be slotting directly into the motherboard. So now it's time to get to building here, and we'll see how it goes. It's finally over. After battling that thing for approximately 30 seconds, time for the moment of truth. Boom, son. Boom, just like that. All right, so the computer is officially together. It powers on. I saw that it can launch to BIOS. So at this point, my next step is going to be installing my operating system, downloading a few programs, start some benchmarking, and I'll make that into another video. I appreciate you guys coming in to watch. Subscribe to my channel, click your bell, whatever you feel you need to do, and all that other shit all the other YouTubers say, and have a good day.